it's an imperative for me, I suppose, for anybody who is serious about studying this complex domain, is to understand the theoretical lenses that help us make sense. Now, I'm not going to take you off into a deep dive into a lot of theories, but I would like to encourage you to look at these next two theories with a little bit more appreciation of their value. I say this because my experience is in leaders of family businesses with the increased complexity, they are what I would call serious learners. They appreciate the theoretical frameworks that help make sense of the mess, and that effectively is the role of theory. The first one is agency theory. Now, agency theory explains so much in organisations, but in this context, it's even more important. So rather than go through a tutorial on agency theory, my charge is for you to go and have a closer look, because I would suggest that it can explain so much, not only in your organisations, but in all organisations. But in the context of family-owned businesses, there are 4 dimensions that I would like you to think about. The potential for agency costs are related to or associated with one or more of these 4 dimensions. The first one being information asymmetry, that the people who are working in the business have access to superior information. Their cousin who doesn't work in the business but is also an owner does not have that same access. In the corporate world, you probably know this as insider trading. Happens, continues to happen, but there's potential in your context for there to be some sort of distrust, some sort of tension around the fact that we have people who are working in the business with access to what's going on to those of us who have elected not to work in the business or aren't working in the business. Information asymmetry. All of these 4 dimensions, as I walk through them, are the reason you introduce governance. To govern the ownership, to govern the family, and to govern the business entities. Information asymmetry. Think about it. You need to communicate and share appropriate information to the stakeholders. The second one, adverse selection. The reason you are having the conversation about the 4 R's is to reduce agency costs related to adverse selection. What are the requirements for these particular roles? Rather than, you're a family member, so that means that you can be a director. No, you're a family member, that means that you can have a job in the business. No, well, maybe yes. If you want to go down that path, go down that path. But be aware that you're opening yourself up to agency costs. Be aware that maybe the system is not running optimally. It's not running at its optimum. So another agency cost related dimension, adverse selection, entrenchment. Link this back to the 4 L's. If you recall the 4th L, learning to let go, again, if an incumbent current leader is stuck in their ways and is not going anywhere, that they are in that 3rd L and they are not having that conversation to move across, that's fine. Well, don't think it's that fine, but that does happen. Now, if you can tolerate that, if you can understand that that's fine, but we're opening ourselves up to agency costs. This system is potentially not running at its optimum. Similarly, as you think about entrenchment, this happens in all organisations where the right people were there at the right time, but that time has moved on. The top management team, the founders' mates, friends, are they dead wood? Are they as productive as they were how do we have those different conversations? Because we are opening ourselves up to costs related to agency. And altruism. Every parent wants to have their offspring, their children, treated equally. And that is fine. But you start to think, well, this gets even more difficult when we're talking about an increasingly complex suite of businesses, an increasingly complex suite of family owners. So we start to think, what are we going to do to reduce the potential for agency costs related to altruism? I have no problem if the decision is to, whether you work in the business or not work in the business, you'll get the same reward. I see that quite often. But I also would suggest to you that that's not efficient, optimal, and sustainable. So do it at your peril. Think about the negative impact of those sorts of decisions. And then think about, that's the role of governance. That's the role of the 4 Rs. We have different roles and we will be remunerated for those different roles. That's the role of the big tent, to say that we do have different pathways, but we do ensure that you are ready, willing, and able to contribute in a meaningful way. So my message is that as you have this conversation, as you become a student of this world, family-owned business world, you start to think about, yes, it's complex, but there are theory-driven, evidence-based frameworks that will help us navigate, will help us come up with solutions to these problems. Think about the role of agency theory and these concepts.